Hello, welcome everybody to our most recent installment of Formula Fitness here at Coda. My name's Maria Marquis. Here at Coda, I focus on customer education, customer empowerment, and I just love hosting events like this where we can nerd out on Coda together, learn a little bit, and also just have some fun. Lucky for all of you, I am joined by the one, the only, the incomparable Ben Lee, who also Ben is so on fire with how awesome he is that there are some fire alarms happening in his place right now. So we might have a couple little moments, but it's just because his knowledge is so hot and so inflaming and so amazing. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself
Yep.
to the group in case they haven't met you on the community?
Sure, sure. Yeah, and it ended up being the perfect storm this morning where they're testing the fire alarms, doing construction. Everything started as soon as the podcast here did. Yeah, so we're ready to go. So thank you for fighting through it with me. My name is Ben Lee. It's important for me to note my last name because we have two Bens at Coda, and I think we're hiring a couple more. So we might be as many as four Bens very soon here.
Ooh.
So, yep, yep. So, yeah, if your name is Ben and you're in the market for a job, apply to Coda. So it's yep. I had originally started out on the marketing side of things, and then after about 4 months at Coda, I moved over to support. It was a much more natural fit for me. I love jumping in and problem solving and seeing what other people are up to. And the community is kind of where I got my start when Coda was in beta. So a
Mhm.
lot of the troubleshooting and everything and figuring things out is it's where I get a lot of energy. I have a lot of fun with it. So I am on the support team now. You'll see me a lot in the community, and I work with everyone from the freelancer to our enterprise users. So yeah, all problems are fun to check out and solve and see what we can figure out there.
Totally. And I will say that Ben is also kind of the go-to person internally. Like if you're trying to figure something out, and you're like, who can I'm going to ask Ben because Ben is the ultimate tinkerer and just his Coda knowledge is unparalleled and super valuable. And I, of course, when we thought about talking about CrossDoc today and CrossDoc actions, the first person on my list was Ben Lee. So today we're going to be exploring CrossDoc, how it works, the purpose of it, and then also exploring how you can start to build cross-doc actions so you can be taking actions in other docs from one central location. Just a few bits and bobs about how to get in touch with us today. We do have the chat field over on the right. Please feel free, use that at any point in time today. Emotional outbursts are totally welcome and fine there. Comments, ideas, go ahead, pop them over there. That is your direct line of communication to me and to Ben. We also have the Ask a Question button along the bottom of the screen. So if you have a question, please put it there. That way we don't lose it in chat. And also you can upvote or downvote questions. So if you have the same question as somebody else, you can be like, oh, boop, me too. And then that lets Ben and I know that that's the one we want to answer first. It's also so great to see a lot of familiar faces here in our group today. I love that we've got our kind of consistent webinar regulars. Always good to see you all. So, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's start to talk about CrossDoc. Now, before Ben and I start to explore the actual exercises that we've built, we were thinking it would actually be really valuable to talk a bit about kind of best practices when it comes to CrossDoc. Because sometimes what I notice when people start to use CrossDoc, this idea of being able to pull in tables from other docs that you have in your Coda universe, that sometimes people can get a little carried away, right? We want to add far too many, or we want to add a lot of complexity. And it's easy to start to clutter up your doc space because you have this ability to bring in other things. So I think it's really important to remember that crosstalk is probably not going to be something you use in every Coda doc that you build. It's going to be something that's a little bit more reserved for specific ones. Ben, do you want to chat a little bit about how you think about, in this case, the word we use is schema, so design organization, when it comes to crosstalk?
Sure. This is a big thing that I run into quite a bit, and I talk through this with a lot of companies, a lot of freelancers, everyone down to a soccer coach. Everybody kind of wants to use things in different ways, and when we jump into stuff, what we try to start building can sometimes start to spin out of control. So it's a great thing to step back and figure out what the overall objective is of the doc that you're building And you don't want to start to kind of start plugging every single thing in that you possibly can. It's a weird world that we live in right now in the sense that we have access to any kind of data we want. uh, I think there's even like little like thumb drives and everything that hold a terabyte of information now.
If not
So
more.
like
Yeah.
you can store all kinds of data, anything that you want. And what that leads to is this mentality of, well, since I have the space for it, I might as well just keep it. And
Mm,
it's sort of like the pictures, you know, you have 10,000 pictures that you've taken and you've gone back to look at them 0 times. So we're kind of in this world where we store everything and it's been so easy. And it also, it doesn't really help us because during our workday, at a glance, when I just want to go look at this chart and know what I need to focus on. And now we put ourselves in a situation where there's 10,000 different data points that we have to look through, and we're hoping to grok all
mm,
the information at a glance, and we just can't. So I always preach like the minimal way to go with data. Try to get in there with as few things as possible and get right to the point for what you need.
yeah.
So part of CrossDoc can let us do that. And there's some tricks that we'll kind of talk about as we go through. There's some cool ways that it's built and some ways that it makes it like really advantageous. So the idea is to not, uh, other people are hearing echoing as well.
Oh yeah, let's just do a quick sound check. I definitely hear like the room that you're in, Ben, because I know it's a big
Mhm.
room there.
Yeah,
Lots of echo. Okay, great. I'm not hearing
okay,
the huge echo on my end. So maybe Ben, what we try let's try having you leave and come back, and we'll see if
yeah,
that helps. Yeah.
okay,
As I'm sure everyone can empathize in this new working from home world, there's lots of technical challenges that we're all
yeah,
overcoming. So thanks for your patience, y'all. Ben, we'll have you leave and then come back, and we'll go
yeah.
from
So
there.
just log out here and then where's it at?
Yeah, if you just, I can go ahead
Let's
and
see.
just close you it as well. I think close you, and then I will bring Ben back. Let's try again. Do, do, do. I know I booted him, but he'll come back. There he is. All right, Ben, let's try now and see if this is any better.
Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. There's definitely a little bit of like extra, like I said, like room noise. I can tell. I know that you've just moved recently, so there's probably not a lot of furniture around you soaking up
Right,
sound.
right.
Um, but let's just do like a quick check, folks. Okay, great. It's a little bit better. Lovely. Well, thanks everyone
Okay.
for your patience, and we'll just keep rocking and rolling, and we'll roll with the 2020 punches today.
Yeah,
Oh, oh, come back,
good.
Ben. There you are.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so back to what I was discussing, aiming for minimal data. What we want is to see everything as plain and clear as possible and at a glance so that will speed up our own workflow. Just because a computer can process a ton of information, that doesn't mean we can process it when we see all
Mm,
that. So I kind of laugh when I see the spreadsheets with like 6-point font and the tiny cells and it's just thousands of things and it's like, so what does the forecast for this project look like? And like, oh, it's somewhere buried in here. If you can find it, then you'll know what it is. Versus just like a bar chart or something that's got like 4 bars on it. You
right.
know, like let's make it simple and use it. So CrossDoc has some advantages there, and there are ways that we can really leverage that. One thing that I do see companies get themselves into is we start creating these things like maybe it's a company roster, and so you've got everybody's names and emails and stuff and everything you need for, to reference people on one doc. That's great. That's a great repository. And then on another one, you've got like all your clients and everything, and you kind of keep going. And then someone comes along and says, well, it would be cool if everything was in this one doc. So I'm going to pull all my clients over here as well. And then they go to the clients doc and I say, oh, wait, we should have our customers over here. So they pull all the customers over there. So now we just have 2 big docs that both
Yeah.
have everything in them. We've just duplicated everything and gone through a lot of headache to do it.
Hmm.
So if you find yourself where, okay, I pulled information over to one doc, and now the information that was in that other doc you're wanting to pull back to the first doc, if you find yourself flip-flopping like that, that's a good time to step back and take a breath and say, okay, let me review what I'm really going for here. You know,
Mhm.
how can I really optimize this?
Yeah.
So the exercises we're going to walk through today, it's sort of a kind of a plan that I came up with, and something that I found that teams can really benefit from.
Mhm.
In a company, you might have 5 different teams working on projects, and it's all kind of towards one goal. You know, for us, it's Coda, the dock surface in general, but there's different projects going on, and it's a lot more than 5 actually. And
Yep.
each team works in their own way. Designers need more, you know, certain things like more images. Um, Engineers need more things like code snippets. They use different tools aside from that. And so every team has their own way of working. So the idea is to get a project roll up so that we know the summary of what each team is working on and how many tasks do you have left. But we don't know, we don't need to know the details of the task.
Mhm.
And we don't need to know every specific little task that each engineer is doing on their project. So let's let them work in their own doc, and then we're just going to bring the summary information over. That way, their doc, they can do whatever they want with it, and it doesn't affect the core one. But we can all still visit the core one and see how every team is doing. If we
Totally.
really need to know the details, we can put a link right in the core doc that goes out to the individual teams. There's
Mhm.
no reason to bring all details from every single team into one place. You're not going to be able to see anything at a glance that way, so it's not really going to benefit you. It's just that it's part of that misconstrued comfort that we think we feel just because we save everything.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I think the big thing that I always take away when I'm designing a doc is you want to have kind of the Marie Kondo approach, right? Does this data bring me joy? But instead of does this data bring me joy, it's does this data bring me value? Like, am I actually using this or am I holding on to it for some reason? And that we always want to come back to when we're designing a doc, what do people need to do? Because information is meaningless unless there is an action associated with it, right? Like, great, I've got all this detail, but am I actually using it? Is it actually helping me do my job? So, always coming back to what do I need people to do? Because information is just a distraction, right? Like, we can know things, but that doesn't necessarily change our behavior. So, we always want to make sure that we have just the right amount of information. It's always bringing us value. And we're always focusing on does this thing I'm about to add to my doc actually contribute to an action? Or to Ben's point, is it just one of the 10,000 photos that I have on my phone because maybe one day I'll want to look at that one picture of me at a place, right?
Yeah.
So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, share my screen, and we're going to go through a couple different exercises with how CrossDoc can kind of come alive. And per usual, we will be publishing. And actually, Ben has a doc already on the gallery that's all about CrossDoc and how it works together, inspired by what we're going to do today. So I'm going to share my screen. You should see it in just a moment. Please, I don't know where that accent came from, but it's going to stay. Go ahead, let me know. Post a chat. Can you see my screen? Can you see it? Beautiful. Excellent. All right. Thank you. Also, Ben, if you could
Yep.
keep an eye out on the bottom of the screen, the ask a question, let me know if any questions come through there. It'll be like a little red button. So
Sounds
before we
good.
get started with the exercises, let's do a bit of an anatomy lesson here because we need to know the parts and the pieces that we're working with. So here's our exercise doc, but the source doc that we're going to be working off of is right here. So you can imagine this is like our database. This is that standard set of information around the projects that our company is working on. This is our whole portfolio. And there's a couple things that we can see here. So the first thing we have is a teams area. And this is, in this case, Ben and I are both animal people. So we've made them animal inspired because why not, right? So Ben, leader of the dog team, very jealous, but at least I'm the leader of the cat team. So we have this teams table, and you can imagine that the teams are static, and we might want to use that in multiple locations, right? We also have this really big projects table, and this is where we have all of the projects that the teams are working on, who's leading it, the budget. So this is kind of that overarching portfolio table. Notice we're doing some progress here. We've also got some budget requests like, hey, I need more money for my kibble improvements. And then we've also created some views of this table by each team. So here, if I go to the dog team projects, this is just a view of that same projects table. In this case, we're just filtering it by the owning team is the dog team. So we've got this kind of standard source doc, but you can imagine that we would want to use this same information in a bunch of other places, right? Like the dog team for the play area improvements, we might want to have a full project plan of, oh, we need to make sure there's like good soil for digging in, and we need to make sure we have a really great fence that the big dogs can't jump over and the little dachshunds can't go between the fences, right? So you can imagine there's a lot of things that we want to do to go a little bit deeper. So now that we've got an idea of this kind of source doc that we're working with, let's go through the exercises and start to explore how this can all come together. So, exercise number 1, I want to bring in all of our team information so that I can reference it. Because again, those teams, the dog team is going to be around for a long time. Cat team, same thing. And we might want to use those teams in different docs in our informational universe. So, how we do this is we just go ahead and we're going to make a little return here. I like to go to the Explore panel because I can just search for like CrossDoc right over here. If my internet would cooperate. Oh, actually, no, I want to go to the packs. Here we go. CrossDoc, I've already set this up here. So now I can see all of the tables that are somewhere in my informational universe. And in this case, I want to search for CrossDoc because that's my source doc over there. So here's that source doc that we were working with just in my other tab. And I can go ahead and click on that. It's going to show me every single table that's in that particular document. So here I could say, you know what? I want to pull in this teams table. Now, it's already in here because I have it in the reveal answer. But if you want to bring in one of these tables, you just drag and drop it over and it's going to add it in. So that's what I did here under reveal answer. This is what it looks like. Now, notice this has all of the same information as that teams table, but it does look a little bit different here. And that's because when you cross-dock something over, it brings in this idea of the row, because the row is so, so important. Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about where this fits and kind of what we're seeing here? Because I think you describe it really well.
Sure, sure. A couple things with the way that CrossDoc works is it does pull in the row. And if you kind of look behind the scenes on some of the way Coda works and the way CrossDoc pulls in the data, it uses JSON code, JSON. You usually see it written in all caps. And it's a way to kind of have nested hierarchies of things. Yep. And it lets us pull in different aspects. So Maria, if you hover over dog team on that row, let's see.
There you go.
Yeah, and we see this nice pop-up here where it says team, dog team, motto, will sit for tweets, and row URL. All of that is going to be in one big data chunk that's got, different brackets and stuff to kind of separate it and stack it up that way. And it's all located in that one row column. It sounds weird to say, we call it the row column, but it's where all the rows are stored. So you technically don't need to have the team and motto columns projected out like that, but it's easier to view that way. So all of your data is stored in that row column right there. And you can add columns. Let's see, Maria, if you click over to your, click over to the source doc.
Source doc? Where is that?
Let's see. Oh, yeah. You click over to the source doc real quick. I want to show one more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I now understand it. It took me a while. I'm new to speaking English here today, so.
Yeah, so on the teams table here, something else to mention as we get started, and since this is the kind of start of things, the CrossDoc action, or the CrossDoc sync is only going to bring over what's visible on the table that you're linked to. So if we hide the motto column here, it will no longer sync or be accessible from the sync doc. If we add a column here, when we resync, it will show up in the new one. So it's a security protection feature so that you don't end up giving people access to something that you don't want them to, or don't want them to have access to. So it's a good thing to keep in mind if you've got an employee list and you've got salaries, you might want to hide the salaries. So you would create a view of that table, hide the salaries, and then only cross-dock the view table where things are hidden.
Hmm.
Um, yep. And another thing with crosstalk that happens is we use the snapshot. So a snapshot is that's another thing it's a little bit complicated in the setup, and it has to do with things like collaborative editing and stuff because Coda is a collaborative doc surface. So when you open a Coda doc, you've got the instance in your browser, and you're able to make edits. But your friend might also have it open, and they might also be making edits. So as your instance and their instance talk to the server that's in the cloud, uh, all of these kind of jobs or like any edits that need to go in get stacked up into this operations log. And as that goes through, there will be certain times where Coda takes a snapshot and says, we're going to catch everything up to this. And so then when you go to open the doc again, you start here and then catch up with the operations and then keep catching up. So snapshots kind of keep going. In order to have the sync work and to know that we're pulling from a data source that is not broken or in the midst of an edit, Coda pulls from the snapshot. So you might see a minute or two latency here as you
Hmm.
make these changes and then resync and see what's available.
Yeah.
Um, so if we hit resync one more time, we might see that surprise column.
Hmm.
And hover over dog team again. Let's see.
Guess we need
Is
just
it
a
there? It's hidden behind the video for me.
Not yet. Not yet. But again, I think it's a good call out
Okay.
that there is more architecture happening behind the scenes. So if you don't see it right away,
Mhm.
like just wait a couple minutes and it should show up there. Two questions that
Yeah.
came in. Will you share the doc? Yes, Diane, we will. After the fact, I'm going to clean it up and make sure that everybody's got that there. So great question, Diane. We'll make sure that we put that out there. And like I said, there's already an existing CrossDoc example on Ben's profile. So that's another option. We have another question here, which is when you were hovering over the CrossDoc item, there was an add column button there. Is that the best way to add info? So this is, so in this case, all of the columns from that table were already synced over. But that add column, that's kind of some existing code from our packs as well as our lookups. So it allows you to kind of, because we're pulling over this rows information, the add column allows you to just kind of continue to pull out the extra row information. So if you want to pull in that contextual detail, you can just do that add column. In this case, it was already all there. But that's also something that if you're using one of our packs, like the Wikipedia pack, you can go ahead and add any of those contextual columns from the row. Because remember, everybody, the row holds on to all of the information about that thing. It's got every single column there, and you can always decide, I want to pull all of that out. Yeah, great question, Karina. Beautiful. All right, so let's take a look at example number 2, because I think what we saw here, this is like the most basic type of crossdock. I just want to pull in that same table information so that I can see it. So let's see kind of the next area where we can build this up. We're going to go ahead and contract that onto exercise 2. So here, I want every team to have access to their tasks, but I don't want them to see the other team's work. So in this case, this is exactly what Ben was talking about, that when we sync things over using CrossDoc, it's only going to pull over the visible columns in that particular table. So here, if we take a look at this reveal answer, what I've done here is I've decided to cross-dock over just the dog team table. So in this case, the dog team is able to see all of their information, but they're not able to come back and go ahead and see what the cat team is doing because we know there's a lot of animosity there between the cat team and the dog team. So in this case, we did that in the exact same way of going over to explore. You can go ahead to packs and import, going to our CrossDoc, finding the doc that we're looking for, which in this case was my CrossDoc source. So again, just like we saw before, and in this case, I just drag and dropped the dog team projects in instead. And I could also do the same thing for cat team. I could just drag over the cat team and pop in the cat team's information and able to pull in all of that detail. So one of the most typical ways that we see this used is for like performance reviews. If you have a bunch of people's information, from performance reviews and you want to distribute it out, you probably don't want to send everyone's performance reviews to everyone. But you could just pull all of the feedback for one person and put it into a doc just for them. So that's one way to think about it. Also, if we think about another really common CrossDoc example, is people information for HR, and maybe salary is in that table. We may not want to have everybody's salary pushed out to everybody else, so we could hide that column and just sync over what we're looking for. Ben, any it's so funny. I'm on the cat team, and here my cat comes. There she goes. Um, Ben, anything else on this idea of kind of syncing over just a view that you think is helpful for folks to know, or how you've seen this play out in your work?
Yeah, when I use CrossDoc, I almost always lean towards syncing over a view. That
Hmm.
lets me do whatever I need to in the main table, and then I'm very deliberate about what my view is in the source doc. So I almost always suggest creating a view and then syncing
Hmm.
the view. That way you can filter it however you need to, and you can still use the main table and adjust the main table as needed.
Right on. Also, we have a good question here. Go for it, Kat. She's going to do this all day, probably. Question from Karina. What is that yellow triangle on the top left of a row? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. The nice thing about anytime you see that little yellow triangle, you can hover over it and it's going to let you know kind of what's going on. You can also click on this little expand row option. That means that there is a comment on this. So here at Ben Lee, I think I'm getting twisted up here. What's the right way to configure pushing another button? And so anytime you see that yellow triangle, it lets you know that there's a comment. Because if we were to add a comment just to our basic text, like here on reveal answer, I could go ahead and be like, hey, at Ben Lee, what's this about? I could do whatever I want. I press send. Not only is it going to show the comment over here as like there's something that's happening, but notice how reveal answer has the little yellow. So we do the same thing when we do that on a row. And in this case, I think that row comments are super valuable when it comes to tasks or projects because it allows you to have a full conversation about that one mini thing. Also, if yellow is not your jam, you don't like that color, you don't want to see it there, you can always go open up your comment menu over here on the side just by, whoo, my goodness, I'm just all over the place. There we go. Just hover, click on that little icon over here, and then you can say, I just want to see all the open comments, or I want to hide them all, or I want to see every comment, even the ones that were resolved. So that's an option for you as well. Yeah, great question. All right. And we have another question here. Oh, we got lots of questions. I love this. Can you filter from a master table when pulling stuff over, or do you need to already have a filtered table on the original doc? So, Natalie, this depends on what kind of information you want that person to see. I can now filter this table however I see fit. But I would still have access to everything. But if you want to make sure that people just see a subsection of your information and not have access to everything, then you would want to filter before pulling stuff over. I'm getting that right, Ben. Yes? That's correct?
Yep, yep, that's
Beautiful.
correct. Another thing to consider here is how much data are you trying to sync over? You might have a doc that has 5,000 rows and you only need, a few hundred.
Mm,
In that case, it's way more beneficial to use a view and just sync over what you need. The
hmm.
sync is going to happen faster. Things are going to be more reactive.
Yeah.
No reason to bring over everything just for the sake of saying, well, now I have everything.
Yeah.
So, yep.
And again, like this comes back to that original theme we had, right? We don't need everything unless we're using everything. I like to think about it like packing for a trip. If Ben and I were going to go camping in Alaska, probably doesn't make sense for us to pack swimsuits. Probably not going to use it, right? So, really thinking about what do you actually need. Great question, Natalie. Um, Question here, why not just create a table with filtered by users and using a lookup? Is that possible instead of several tables specific for each team? Totally, Christian. Here, I think the key is if that information exists in another doc and you don't want to update both places, that's where CrossDoc can be really helpful. But there's no reason why you can't just create a filtered view by user. That's also totally acceptable and honestly something I use probably more frequently. Great call out. And then, can the filtered row be further filtered by the end user? So, yeah, now that I'm in this dock and I'm living and breathing here, I could go ahead and add my own filters on this. So I could say, I want to filter in this case where the budget is between, more than $9,500. So I could go ahead and play with this information. And now this is now my play space. It's important to know that any of the filtering and the adding of columns that I do here do not get pushed back to our source doc. This is kind of like me annotating it. So that's, I think, an important note there. Ben, do you want to talk a little bit to that? Because I think that's a really important nuance.
Sure. There's definitely a want and a request to have two-way sync. We don't have that. This is our version 1 of CrossDoc, and it does quite a bit for us already, but we kind of have to work within the bounds of what it offers. A good way to think about CrossDoc and a sync table as we have it now is the source table is where the data is. The sync table in your other doc, think of it as a programmatic copy and paste.
Mm.
It goes and checks the source table, and then it brings in that data and pastes it into your sync table, and it does that periodically.
Yep.
It's not talking consistently. It's not up to the date every second. It is just kind of that copy and paste in on a regular basis, or or when you click the sync button.
Yeah.
So it's not two-way sync. For that, we've got an exercise a little further down that we'll get to on how to make updates. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, for now it's just it's good to know that it's like a programmatic copy and paste into this. So this table will act just as its own table. It's just getting its information pasted in from
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere.
That's a great call out, Ben. And I do want to highlight that you
Yeah.
can decide how often you want that programmatic coffee. Ooh, clearly I need some more
Yeah.
programmatic copy and paste. If you go to the table's options, notice you have this set of cross-doc table options. If you click on that, you can go ahead to the settings and say, I want to refresh it manually or daily, hourly. And then you can also say, just give me 100 rows or 10,000 or add your own syncing options there as well. So that's an
Mhm.
important little call out you can always adjust. All right, so those are kind of the two really basic cross-doc examples. The idea of I want to bring over a full thing or I want to bring over just a view. So let's take a look at exercise number 3 and see what that has in store. So in this case, maybe I want to use the project information in a task table, right? So the dog team has multiple projects they're working on, and there's probably a lot of tasks associated with it. So how can I pull in, which project each of those tasks are part of? So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on here. What I've done here is I've created a lookup column to the play area improvements. So now that I've got, in this case, I believe we pulled it over into exercise 2. Yes, our dog team here. And we're going to go ahead and remove this filter just so we have all of our fantastic dog team projects. Now that I've got this table, I can now treat it like any other table inside of my Coda doc. So here, I just made this project a lookup column to, oh goodness, what happened? I just clicked the wrong spot. We go to our lookup options, and now notice I'm just deciding, hey, I want to look up to the dog team projects. And now I've got that as my column option, and I can now add more tasks. So maybe we want to have bring your own Kong program. And then maybe we want to have a paw washing station, So now we can use this however we see fit. And if we were to add, another project here, it would then also show up in our menu with here. So what this allows you to do is once you have that data source, you can then use it in the ways that you're really familiar. And it allows you to kind of expand on that and be able to really make a difference there. Anything else on kind of how we can then use tables once we've cross-docked them in, Ben, that I'm missing?
One small detail that I just saw is that this also applies to the display column.
Mm,
And so what happens when you cross-dock something in your sync table, a lot of times it'll assign the very first column to the display column, and that's that row which holds all the data. So we might just want to make it the project or,
mm,
yep,
yeah.
yeah. So, yep. So you're, again, it's its own table when you pull it in. So it's good to set your display column so that it shows up if you use it for lookups elsewhere and stuff.
Hmm.
So, yep.
Yeah. Excellent. And for those of you who are kind of new to this idea of the display column just means that's going to be the thing that shows up when I type at and then play area improvements. So it can go ahead and now I can reference that elsewhere. So it's just in this case, what do I want it to say here? If I change the display column to be the team leader, that would be the thing that would show up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving right along, let's take a look at exercise 4. So this is where we start to kind of take this to the next level. I want to update our progress in the source doc from our team doc. So I want to be able to affect change back in our home base. And this is where we use something called CrossDoc actions. And we use a button and CrossDoc together to accomplish this. So what I've done here is I've created a update progress button. And let's go ahead under the hood and take a look at how this is put together. So we're going to go to our button options. And here we're using a CrossDoc action. So here, let's take a look. Now that I have CrossDoc on this particular document, I can now use CrossDoc formulas to set this up. So here what I'm saying is, all right, let's do CrossDoc and we want to modify the row. We're using our private CrossDoc account, so my account. We want to use it on this row's URL because the URL back at home base is kind of the identifier. And in this case, we want to update the progress column with whatever the progress is here. So what we're doing is we're taking some information from this location and we want to push it back to our home base. So in this case, we're making that connection there. Ben, anything else around kind of this particular action that's important for folks to keep in mind, how this works together?
Yeah, this is getting into a couple more advanced things here, but just to kind of pick apart the formula, the crossdock and then colon modify row, that's one formula call. You might be used to seeing our buttons as a formula builder. So Maria, if you want to click the formula button there,
Sure.
and if we can display it as the builder on the, yeah, there we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, so now you see that action, and then you can choose from the drop down the crossdock modify row. So we've got that. So internet looks a little slow, so if I seem way off from where she's clicking, that's just waiting for the screen to update here. So then you choose the account, and that's this is what gives us the permissions to be able to write to the other docs. So you'll see a lot of these say read write access. If you just set up a sync account, when you drag a table in, a lot of times it's just read access only. So if you're hitting the button and nothing's updating, and then you go in and check your permissions here, and you see read only, you don't see read write access on any of these, that's a good sign that you just don't have permission to write to it. So that's a good thing to check real quick as well. If we go, and then the next one, the row.row URL. So we use row URL in a couple places. When you click the row pop-up to just see the modal pop-up in the larger view of the row, that's one URL. But as Maria mentioned, we want the URL that's from home base. So we're looking back at the other doc and using it as an identifier so that we know what row to update.
Here we go.
Yeah, let's see. So back at the button stuff here. Yep. Yeah, there's the row URL. That'll be the identifier.
So think about the row URL kind of like someone's social security
back on the
number
button
or their
situation.
driver's license number. Yeah, that it's
Yeah.
like that is the unique, that lets us know exactly who that row is in the larger context.
Yep.
And
Yeah, so
actually,
one more thing. Oh, go ahead.
oh, no, finish your thought, Ben.
If you want to open up the button options one more time there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Boop, boop, boo.
So it's sort of a troubleshooting step that I go through. If you scroll down a little bit, we don't see any column stuff anymore. Our builder does not always pick up what the column is. So this is where we want to click over to the formula aspect of it. So this kind of lets us get our head start. We know we want to modify the row. We know we need an account, and we know the row URL. But you see the progress in quotes and the progress that references the current row with the value, or the current row and column value. That we kind of have to type in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting errors, or you're like, or something says it's not finished, or you don't have all the configuration, it's good to click into the formula and make sure that you've set a
Yep.
column that you want to update in home base, and then you set the value that you want it to update with.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing in our builder. It's hard to retrieve the columns, so
Yeah.
we don't have that perfected just yet.
And I will say that when I first got started with CrossDoc actions, I was just using the like drop down menu of like CrossDoc, choose modify row, and then this. And I was like, wait, where's the other stuff? And yes, you have to go into the formula then to add what exactly you want to cover. So Natalie has a question, which is, will this update if the user doesn't have permission? So that's why Ben was talking about needing to give CrossDoc that read-write access. So even if the user doesn't have permission in that doc, you can say this doc and the person using it can update back in home base. I'm getting that right, Ben? I see a nod, so I'm
Yep.
feeling good.
Yeah.
Yep.
If actually, if you want to click on Explore,
Yes, indeed, I do. How did you know?
yeah, and click on Packs.
Oh, I got all excited. Hold on.
Yeah,
My bad. Explore. There we go. Packs and import.
yeah, and CrossDoc and settings. Here you'll see we've got different accounts, and at the top we've got Maria's avatar, because she's in her account, and it says private account, and it's just under, it says shared accounts. Yeah, so that's, yep. So yeah, under shared accounts, and you see we've got one there, the cat. Remember in one of the first exercises, she dragged over the cat table, the cat view, and it says view data. That one won't let us write to it. So if she clicks that drop down, yep, and then take actions in view data, now that's a shared connection that we can choose from our options when we create the button, and it will allow any user that has permission to use this doc to write actions.
Hmm.
Yep. So.
Yeah, and notice how this is something we can set on a table by table basis, right? Cat team projects. We could also do it for the CrossDoc, the projects, the dog team. So you can be really granular here if you like. Yeah, great question. We also have a question here, which is, are there pre-programmed crosstalk actions, or do you need to know all these formulas? So like Ben was saying, this is kind of the first version of crosstalk. So at this point, you can choose the actions from that drop-down menu, but then you need to add that little formula tag at the end. But just like any other formula in Coda, when you pull up the formula builder by clicking the F, it's going to let you know the variables that it needs. But in general, the variables you have to include is like, what do I want to update in this case? And sort of where it updates and then who. And Ben actually has a full video walkthrough in his CrossDoc doc that walks through all of that. Yeah. Good question. What is the formula behind that progress column? Well, I will be happy to show it to you. So we can go ahead. We know there's a formula at play because it's got this little F, just like that. Let's go ahead and click on that little bad boy there. Choose Edit Formula. And then in this case, we're just saying the row dot progress, and we want to see it as a scale. So that's actually what we're doing is we're actually calculating this off of our tasks table. Let me go ahead and open that up. Because remember, we made this like overarching task one. We then have it populating back. So in this case, this is just an expression of a number, but we've decided instead of having it be a number, we've changed the column type to be a scale icon instead? Yeah, great question. Oh, and thank you, Ben, for posting your doc there. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All righty. So let's take a look at another type of crosstalk action. So under exercise number 5 here, and we'll start to notice there's a pattern. So here, I want to add new projects to our source doc. So you can imagine the dog and the cat team are rocking and rolling. They're doing all this great work, and they realize, oh, we have a new project that we want to launch. It's absolutely critical. It's all about, keeping our fur shiny, whatever it might be. So maybe we want to update our home base. So we're going to use a CrossDoc action here as well. So before we saw that that need to include the part of the row that we want to modify, we're going to use a similar pattern here, except it's about adding. And just like before, it's being powered by a button, in this case, our Fund Project button. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this is put together. Go to our button options. So here, the action we chose, instead of CrossDoc and modify row, it's CrossDoc and add row here. And yes, you can copy Ben's doc, Karina, totally. In
Oh,
this case, the account that we're using is read-write access to the projects table, so that overarching project. And in this case, we have to include the table's URL. So let's go ahead and take a look. This looks a little bit complicated, but I promise we'll break it down. So just like before, we have CrossDoc and then the type of action we want to do. In this case, it's add row. Then we choose the account. So this is being populated by that drop-down menu. Then we include the URL for the table that we want to work with. And I'll show you a really quick way on how to get that, which is if you take a look at your CrossDoc table, this little here, that's a great way to just get the URL. Let's head back, open it up to our button options. So we said, all right, this is the table that I want you to go to by including that URL. And then we have to say what we want to change, what we want to update, right? So here we want to update the project column with the proposed project right over here. We want to update the owning team column with this proposed projects.team. And we want to update the budget with this proposed budget here. So even though we have a really long formula, it's really just including a list of all the things we want to change. Because if we head back to our source doc and that projects table, what we want to make sure we're doing is updating project, owning team, and budget, right? So it allows us to say exactly what we want to include there. So if I click on Fund Project for the Cat Alliance, it's going to go ahead and do that. Oh, it failed to take an action. I wonder why that is. Let's go ahead and take a look. Ben, what do you think we messed up here? I wonder.
uh, good question. Let's see.
It might be the table URL. Maybe I included the wrong one here. We have read-write access. That's looking all right.
There is one other tricky thing here.
Mm-hmm.
We're using a, a value that's a lookup. So if you look at the
Ah,
team, it's a lookup to another table. So this can
yes.
get tricky. I think it should pick it up is okay, but
Mm.
yeah, it's the owning team, proposed projects
Yeah, you know
team.
what it is, Ben? I think what
I
we're
believe
doing,
that, yeah, I believe it should work. I'm not sure if that's the issue or not.
I think you're right,
So,
because notice everybody, if we look at the icons, anytime we're in trouble with a formula, right? We want to look at the icons and the colors because that lets us know what we're dealing with. And notice this is a stack of budgets and a stack of teams. So we would want to make it to be this row to bring it over. Because right now, what it's trying to do is it's trying to take a list of all the proposed project teams, because we see the little stack of rows here, and put them into that one cell. And that's not going to work. So we would want to add this row. So propose this row dot proposed projects dot team or proposed projects dot team dot this row, and do the same thing for the budget there. So I'll fix that
mhm.
after the fact. But a really great example of how always wanting to look at
Mhm.
the icons to let you know, am I dealing with a list, an array, or just one thing? In this case, we had that list array and we're looking for one thing. And then always looking at the colors. Is it pulling from the right location? Awesome. So let's take a look at exercise number 6 here. And in this case, when a project completes, I want to delete the row in the source doc for the project. Because if the Kibble review project is closed, we don't want to have it in our master area anymore. So let's take a look at how we do this. Again, the same process that we're seeing, right, is this button that powers an action. So if we click on this little button options, go up here, really the only difference, oh my goodness, my mouse is just all over the place, everybody. I'm so sorry. Let's just scroll on down, take 2, go to our button options right up on the top. There we go. So notice it's scared of all the cats and dogs. Ah, the mouse. Oh my gosh, Karina. Why did I not think of that? That is perfect. Oh my gosh. All right. So everybody, you should start to notice we're dealing with the same exact pattern. We're just changing a couple variables. In this case, we're still using that CrossDoc action, but instead of choosing add row or modify row, we're choosing delete row. Yeah, so that's the first step. Then we need to choose the account, right? In this case, we want to go back to that read write access to the projects table. Yeah. Then we're pulling in the row and the row URL because in this case, we're dealing with that one singular sensation here. And then if we head up to our formula options where we can take a closer look, now we can go ahead and see how this is working. In this case, we just want to remove that row that this button is in. So it's a way for us to then have that connection point. So in this case, when we think about cross-doc actions, there's sort of two things to think about. If it's an add or a delete, it's which row is it and where is it going? And if we are dealing with a modify situation, we need to include the values that we want to modify. But it's always going to start off with crossdoc, the type of action, the account, and then the changes that we're making. Yeah?
Mhm.
All right. So let's take a look at our final exercise here today, exercise number 7. And this one is taking a look at one of the like fancy crossdoc actions, which is I want to push a button that notifies our project leads with a request for more budget. So here, the crossdoc action we're using is pushing a button. So we're using our button to push another button. And I want to just take a little detour back to our crossdoc area here. Notice we have a button here that says budget request. And this is in our source, our home base. And if we go to the button options right over here, we can see it says notify the lead, which is one of our columns, that a budget increase has been requested. So we want folks, if they're in their own team docs, to be able to request that budget without having to have to come back here, find the project in the row, all that good jazz. So let's go ahead and take a look. So here, let's go ahead and see what we've got. We've got the update progress because we're dealing with just a view. And let's go ahead and create this request more budget. So we're going to go to button options. There we go. The crossdoc action we're choosing is push a button. We've chosen this account and we've said we want this row and the row's URL. But Ben, do you want to walk us through kind of the rest of this formula here?
Yes. So we see that little error. We've got that red dot and we've got a hint. CrossDoc push button needs an input for column. So something happened here when we were setting up this doc. And in the source doc, back at home base, on the table that we're trying to push a button in, we had the column for the button hidden. And remember we talked about permissions at the beginning, where if it's hidden, CrossDoc doesn't have access to it. So we had to display the column, and then we waited for a little bit so that the snapshot would take, and then we would resync this table, and now a column is visible again. So actually, if we click out of the formula, I think we'll be able to use a feature for the, yeah, click on the formula button there, yep. And we've got a column option, and when you click on that, you see how it's got the circle, it's kind of doing its thing, and CrossDoc is going to check and say, hey, what columns are button columns on this table are visible? And we've got notify for budget, so we can choose that one there. And now our button is showing up as hopefully workable, so we can give it a try.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good reinforcement to remind ourselves that again, crossdoc is that programmatic copy paste, and it can't paste anything that's not visible. And that is a security option for you, right? Deciding exactly what you do and don't want to send out. So now if we click request for more budget, we can test to see if that worked out. It's go ahead and doing its thing. And it says one external action performed. That lets you know that crossdoc is rocking and rolling. That means we've pushed that button back at home base, and then the team leader has gotten that request. So if we think about crossdoc, I will acknowledge that there's a little bit of complexity to it, right? Because it's blending sort of a traditional sort of button and drop down menu with some formula knowledge. But as with all Coda formulas, we want to be looking for those cues that help us troubleshoot our own actions, right? So that red dot that lets us know there's something missing, and then looking at the error message. When we open up a formula and we're starting to write one, taking a look at the text around it. What does it need from me? Like if I click on this formula here and then I click into it, looking at the structure that's being presented to me here. And then just like we saw with our previous error, looking at the colors and looking at the icons to let us know what we're dealing with. So you can use that same kind of intention, but remembering the pattern is always, what is the action? What kind of access of the account are we working with? Where is the location? And then what are the changes that we're making to it? Yeah.
Mhm.
Excellent. Ben, any other thoughts on CrossDoc, advice for people just getting started? I certainly recommend check out Ben's doc. He's got a really great like step-by-step video walkthrough of how to set up that modify row, which is one of my favorite things. I definitely recommend folks taking a look. It also just gives you sample data that you can play with, so you don't have to worry about be working in your own instance and all that jazz. So that's a great place to get going. But Ben, what do you recommend for folks as they're getting started?
Set up 2 practice talks.
Hmm.
Um, Something that I love about Coda and that drives me nuts about some other things is the feeling of having to know everything up front, and you just don't have to do that in Coda.
Hmm.
You can play around, you can mess around, you can create things. It doesn't have to be real things. Definitely just get in, play, get your hands dirty, experiment, see what works, see what doesn't, check the community, have fun with it.
Hmm.
It's I like to do that a lot. Sometimes if I'm building a complex project, I'll have a play doc as well that's got most of
Yeah,
the information in it, and I'll practice stuff, and then I'm like, oh, this is the formula that really works, and then I'll copy that formula over to my final version. I love having the playground
totally.
with this experiment, so that's a great place to start.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is you probably won't need to use CrossDoc. No, not you probably won't. You won't need to use CrossDoc on the first doc you build, right? Remember that this is when you start to have multiple docs that you're working with that are using or needing to access the same data, right? So
Mhm.
don't feel pressured to do it. You don't have to do it until you got multiple docs anyway. And always coming back to, what do people need to do and how can I support them? Yeah. So we've got about 2 minutes left. So if there's any other questions you have, please let us know. We have one more webinar for 2020, which is on Friday, which is going to be a conversation with our CEO, Shashir, reflecting on 2020, also hearing from all of you about what you'd like to see for 2021 and kind of his thoughts on the year ahead. So definitely feel free to join us for that. Also, we've got oodles of other Formula Fitness out on our Crowdcast channel. Please do watch the recordings, check them out. And also let us know what other Formula Fitness sessions you'd like us to run, because it's something that I really enjoy breaking it down and chatting about it. And I always learn something new when we're on these calls too. So let us know if there's anything else you need. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely rest of the year. Thank you for being the best part of Coda, which is our makers. We get so much inspiration from all of you, and it's a true privilege to be able to spend time with you. Oh, good. Thanks, Yost. So good to see you, buddy. Will you get links to both the source and exercise docs? Yes, I just got to clean it up a little bit and then I'll send it out. I'll just post it here to the chat. So I'll do that right after our conversation here today. Awesome. Well, Ben, thank you so much. It is always a delight to be able to spend time with you. Thank you for all of the help that you gave me as I was learning these new things and for all the help you give to our customers. You are an absolute champion among champions. And it was so great to spend some time with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always a lot of fun. As always, check out the community. Something I love about Coda is there's infinite possibilities. You can create anything you want.
Hmm.
So diversity and thinking becomes really important. And seeing how everybody approaches problems. Every single day, I learn something new about Coda. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter how good you get. It's people are going to teach you stuff, and people are going to stumble on really cool things. So
Yeah.
yeah, so keep reading up on it, playing around, and participating. It's a lot of fun.
Right
Yeah.
on. All right, everybody. Well, we'll close out our session for today. Keep an eye on the chat. I'll post the link there as soon as that doc is ready. And we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your year, y'all. Okay, bye.